The emergency room at St. Mary's Hospital buzzed with its usual chaos, but Sarah Martinez moved through it with practiced grace. Her scrubs were wrinkled from the 12-hour shift, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, and exhaustion lined her face. At 28, she had been a registered nurse for 6 years, but, to many around her, she was still just another face in scrubs. Dr. Richardson barely glanced up from his clipboard as Sarah approached with patient updates. "Just leave the charts on my desk," he muttered dismissively. "I'll review them when I have time for the real medical decisions." Sarah bit her tongue, as she had countless times before. She had grown accustomed to the condescending attitudes from some doctors who treated nurses like glorified assistants rather than the skilled medical professionals they were. Her colleagues whispered behind her back about her humble background, the daughter of a janitor and a cafeteria worker who had somehow managed to scrape together enough money for nursing school. The afternoon brought an unusual influx of patients. A multi-car accident on the interstate had filled every available bed, and the staff was stretched thin. Sarah found herself assigned to the trauma bay, where she worked alongside Dr. Mitchell, one of the few physicians who respected her expertise. "Sarah, what do you think about the patient in bed 3? Dr. Mitchell asked quietly, pulling her aside. "Something feels off, but I can't put my finger on it." She had noticed it too. The elderly man claimed to be a homeless veteran seeking treatment for chest pain, but several things didn't add up. His hands were too clean, his speech too articulate, and there was something about the way he carried himself that suggested military training that went beyond basic service. Most telling were his eyes, alert, calculating, constantly scanning the room as if assessing threats. "His vitals are stable, but there's definitely something unusual about him," Sarah agreed. "He keeps asking specific questions about our security protocols and staff schedules. It could be nothing, but my instincts are telling me otherwise." Dr. Mitchell nodded. "Keep a close eye on him. Trust your gut. It's saved patients before." As Sarah continued her rounds, she couldn't shake the feeling that the mysterious patient was watching her every move. When she brought him his medication, he studied her name badge intently and asked questions that seemed oddly personal for someone seeking routine medical care. "Sarah Martinez," he repeated slowly. "That's a beautiful name. Tell me, how long have you worked here?" "Several years," she replied professionally, not wanting to share personal information. "And do you enjoy being just a nurse?" The way he emphasized just made her bristle. "There's no just about being a nurse," she replied firmly. "We save lives every day." The man's eyes crinkled with what might have been approval. "Indeed you do, young lady. Indeed you do." Later that evening, as Sarah was finishing her documentation, she overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. Two men in expensive suits were talking quietly near the nurse's station, and their words caught her attention. "The target will be here tomorrow," one was saying. "Everything needs to be in place." "What about the staff?" the other asked. "They're nobodies. Just nurses and doctors who won't cause any trouble." Sarah pretended to be absorbed in her paperwork while straining to hear more. The men continued discussing what sounded like some kind of operation plan for the hospital the following day. When they mentioned eliminating witnesses, her heart began to race. She tried to catch Dr. Mitchell's attention, but he had left for the night. The mysterious patient was sleeping peacefully, and she wondered if she was letting her imagination run wild. But years of nursing had taught her to trust her instincts, and every instinct was screaming that something dangerous was about to happen. As her shift ended, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. Instead of going home to her small apartment, she decided to stay and keep watch. She found an empty on-call room and settled in, determined to be ready for whatever was coming. Outside the hospital, she didn't notice the figure watching from the shadows, the same elderly homeless veteran who had been asking so many questions. He spoke quietly into a small device hidden in his jacket. "Target confirmed. The nurse suspects something. She might be useful." The voice on the other end was crisp and professional. "Understood. Maintain observation. The package arrives at dawn." Sarah stared out the small window of the on-call room, unaware that her world was about to turn upside down. Tomorrow would test everything she believed about herself and reveal that sometimes the most extraordinary people hide in the most ordinary places. The daughter of a janitor and cafeteria worker was about to discover that her calling to help others would put her at the center of a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government. In the distance, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, and Sarah pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders. She had no idea that by tomorrow night, she would be questioning everything she thought she knew about trust, courage, and the true meaning of service to others. Sarah woke to the sound of hushed voices and hurried footsteps in the hallway outside the on-call room. Dawn was breaking through the small window, painting everything in muted grays and blues. Her neck was stiff from sleeping in the chair, but her mind was immediately alert. Something was happening. She cracked the door open and peered out. The hospital seemed different somehow, more tense, more watchful. Security guards she didn't recognize were positioned at key points throughout the ward, and their uniforms looked more military than hospital standard. These weren't the usual rent-a-cops who normally patrolled St. Mary's. Making her way to the nurse's station, Sarah tried to act normally as she checked the night shift reports. Her mysterious patient from yesterday was gone, discharged early that morning according to the notes, though no one seemed to remember processing his paperwork. "Sarah," Dr. Richardson called out, his voice sharper than usual. "We need you in Trauma Bay 2 immediately. VIP patient incoming." She hurried to the Trauma Bay, where a flurry of activity was already underway. Medical equipment was being moved into position, and the entire team looked unusually nervous. Dr. Mitchell caught her eye and shook his head slightly, a warning. "What's the situation?" Sarah asked quietly. "High-profile patient," Dr. Mitchell replied in a low voice. "Federal Protection Detail. We've been told to ask no questions and follow orders exactly." Before Sarah could respond, the Trauma Bay doors burst open. A convoy of black SUVs had arrived outside, and men in dark suits were escorting a stretcher into the hospital. The patient appeared to be unconscious, covered in blankets, with an oxygen mask over his face. But as the stretcher passed under the bright Trauma Bay lights, Sarah caught a glimpse of the patient's face, and her blood turned to ice. She recognized him from countless news broadcasts and newspaper photos. It was Senator James Morrison, the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee and one of the most powerful men in Washington. "Gunshot wound to the chest," announced the lead paramedic. "Vitals are stable, but he's lost a lot of blood." As the medical team sprang into action, Sarah noticed something that made her stomach drop. The two men in expensive suits from the previous evening were back, standing in the corner of the Trauma Bay and watching everything with cold, calculating eyes. They weren't here as protection. They were here to finish what they had started. Dr. Richardson was completely focused on the medical emergency, but Sarah's nursing training had taught her to observe everything. She watched as one of the suited men slowly reached inside his jacket, his hand moving toward what was clearly a concealed weapon. In that moment, time seemed to slow down. Sarah realized that Senator Morrison wasn't here for emergency treatment. He was being brought here to be killed, and everyone in this room, including herself, would be eliminated as witnesses. The Federal Protection Detail was actually an assassination team. Without thinking, Sarah grabbed a nearby crash cart and deliberately rolled it into the suited man's path, causing him to stumble and curse under his breath. "I'm so sorry," she said loudly, drawing everyone's attention to the disturbance. These things have a mind of their own. The commotion gave her the chance to catch Dr. Mitchell's eye and mouth the word danger. His expression changed immediately as he began to understand what was happening. "We need more hands in here," Dr. Mitchell announced suddenly. "Sarah, call security and have them clear the area of all non-medical personnel. Hospital policy for trauma situations." The suited men exchanged glances, clearly not expecting this development. "That won't be necessary," the leader said smoothly. "We're federal agents. We stay with our protectee at all times." "Not in my Trauma Bay," Dr. Richardson said firmly, finally, looking up from his patient. "This is a sterile medical environment. Either show me proper credentials and medical clearance, or wait outside." Sarah's heart was pounding as she watched the tension escalate. The fake agents were clearly debating whether to abandon their cover and complete their mission by force. She knew they were seconds away from violence when suddenly, a new voice cut through the chaos. "I believe these gentlemen were just leaving." Everyone turned to see the elderly homeless veteran from the previous day standing in the doorway. But he was completely transformed. Gone were the ragged clothes and disheveled appearance. Now he stood in a crisp military uniform with ribbons and insignia that spoke of decades of distinguished service. His bearing was unmistakably that of a career soldier, and his eyes held the kind of authority that came from commanding men in life-or-death situations. "Colonel Apache," one of the fake agents said, his voice tight with surprise and fear. "Actually, it's General Apache now," the man replied calmly. "And you're under arrest for treason, conspiracy, and attempted murder of a United States senator." The trauma bay erupted into chaos as the fake agents reached for their weapons, but they had underestimated their opponent. General Apache moved with the fluid precision of someone who had spent decades in special operations, disarming both men before they could clear their holsters. Sarah pressed herself against the wall as real federal agents flooded into the room, their weapons drawn and voices shouting commands. Dr. Richardson and his team continued working on Senator Morrison throughout the mayhem, their training allowing them to focus on saving a life even as a firefight nearly erupted around them. "How did you know?" General Apache asked Sarah as the situation was brought under control. "Nursing teaches you to notice when things don't add up," she replied, still shaking from the adrenaline. "They didn't act like real protection detail, and yesterday you were asking questions like you were gathering intelligence." The general nodded approvingly. "You may have saved the senator's life today, young lady, and probably your own as well." As the fake agents were led away in handcuffs, and Senator Morrison was stabilized for surgery, Sarah began to process what had just happened. Somehow, her instincts and training had put her in the middle of what appeared to be a major conspiracy. But she had a feeling that this was only the beginning. General Apache approached her as she was giving her statement to real federal agents. "Miss Martinez, I have a feeling we're going to need to talk more. This conspiracy goes deeper than just two hired guns, and your sharp eyes might be exactly what we need to unravel it." Sarah looked around the trauma bay, now crawling with federal agents and military personnel, and realized that her quiet life as just a nurse was about to become anything but quiet. The daughter of a janitor and cafeteria worker had somehow become a key player in a plot that threatened the highest levels of government. 3 hours later, Sarah found herself in a conference room she never knew existed in the hospital's basement level. The walls were lined with communication equipment, and federal agents moved in and out with urgent purpose. General Apache sat across from her, no longer resembling the homeless veteran who had wandered into their emergency room. "Miss Martinez, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels," General Apache began, his voice grave. Senator Morrison wasn't just any target. He was preparing to expose a conspiracy within our own intelligence agencies, a group selling state secrets to foreign powers. Sarah's coffee cup trembled slightly in her hands. "Why are you telling me this? I'm just a nurse." General Apache leaned forward, his weathered face serious. "Because you're not just anything. Your actions today prevented an assassination and exposed a cell of traitors. More importantly, we believe this hospital has been compromised for months." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were photographs and documents that made Sarah's blood run cold. Pictures of hospital staff members meeting with unknown individuals in parking garages. Financial records showing mysterious payments to several employees. Most shocking of all was a list of patients who had died under suspicious circumstances, all of them connected to sensitive government work. "We've been investigating St. Mary's for 3 months, General Apache continued. "Someone has been using this hospital as a base of operations. Patients with classified knowledge have been dying of complications that our medical experts say were actually induced." Sarah studied the photographs more carefully and gasped. One showed Dr. Richardson shaking hands with a man in a dark coat outside the hospital. Another captured the head of security, someone she had trusted, passing an envelope to an unknown contact. "I don't understand," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why would they do this? Money, power, blackmail. The usual reasons people betray their country," General Apache replied. "But here's what we need you to understand. You're in danger now. By stopping the assassination attempt, you've blown their cover. They know you're a threat. As if summoned by his words, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Accidents happen to nurses who don't mind their own business. Your family lives at 1247 Oak Street, doesn't it? The color drained from Sarah's face as she showed the message to General Apache. Her parents' address was exactly right. We've already moved your family to a safe house, he said quickly, seeing her panic. They're under federal protection as of 2 hours ago. This is insane, Sarah said, standing up and pacing. Yesterday, I was worried about covering my patient load, and now you're telling me my family needs protection from traitors? I know it's overwhelming, General Apache said gently, but we need your help to stop them. You know this hospital better than any federal agent ever could. You understand the routines, the personalities, the things that would seem normal to an outsider, but are actually suspicious. Before Sarah could respond, an agent burst through the door. General, we've got movement. 3 black sedans just pulled into the hospital parking garage. They're not on any official visitor list. General Apache was immediately alert. How many people? At least 12, all armed, the agent reported. They're moving toward the main entrance now. Sarah felt her world spinning out of control. Are they coming for me? Probably. General Apache replied grimly. They need to eliminate you before you can identify any other conspirators. But we're not going to let that happen. He pressed a small device into her hand. This is a panic button. If anything goes wrong, press it, and help will come immediately. But right now, I need you to act completely normal. Go back to your shift. Pretend nothing has happened. You want me to use myself as bait? Sarah asked incredulously. I want you to help us catch them before they can kill anyone else, General Apache replied. You've already saved 1 life today. Now we need you to help save many more. Against every instinct telling her to run, Sarah found herself walking back toward the main hospital floors. The elevator ride seemed to last forever, and her hands were shaking as she approached the nurse's station. Everything looked normal at first glance, but now she saw the signs that had been there all along. The new security guards weren't just armed. They were positioned to control all the exits. Dr. Richardson was having hushed conversations with people she didn't recognize. The head nurse was acting nervous, constantly checking her phone. Sarah, called Dr. Richardson as she tried to blend back into her normal routine. I need you to prepare room 314 for a special patient. Room 314 was isolated at the end of a hallway with no security cameras. She knew because she'd complained about the blind spot for months. Now she realized why her complaints had been ignored. What kind of patient? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Someone who needs privacy, Dr. Richardson replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Don't worry about the details. Just make sure you're there when they arrive. Sarah nodded and walked toward room 314, acutely aware that she was probably walking into a trap. But as she prepared the room, she noticed something that gave her hope. General Apache had positioned his own people throughout the hospital. She spotted at least 3 agents disguised as janitors, orderlies, and visitors. Her phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number, but this one was different. Help is closer than you think. Stay calm. Stay alert. The eagle flies at midnight. It was a code phrase General Apache had mentioned, letting her know his people were in position. As footsteps approached the room, Sarah took a deep breath and prepared for whatever was coming. She was no longer just a nurse trying to get through another shift. She was a key player in a deadly game where one wrong move could cost innocent lives. The door opened, and Dr. Richardson entered with 2 men she didn't recognize. Their eyes were cold, professional, and utterly without mercy. Thank you, Sarah, Dr. Richardson said quietly. Your service to this hospital has been very valuable. Unfortunately, it's about to come to an end. Sarah's hand moved toward the panic button hidden in her pocket, but she forced herself to wait. General Apache had taught her that timing was everything, and she needed to gather as much information as possible before revealing her hand. I don't understand, Dr. Richardson, she said, playing for time. What's this about? You understand more than you're letting on, one of the strangers replied. The question is, how much have you told the federal agents? Sarah realized this was her moment of truth. Everything she said next would determine not just her own survival, but the success of the entire operation to uncover the conspiracy. Federal agents? Sarah asked, trying to sound confused while her heart hammered against her ribs. What federal agents? I don't know what you're talking about. Dr. Richardson studied her face carefully. Don't play games with us, Sarah. We know you were in the trauma bay when Senator Morrison was brought in. We know you interfered with our operation. The stranger to his left pulled out a tablet and showed Sarah surveillance footage from the hospital's security cameras. She watched herself deliberately rolling the crash cart into the assassin's path, her face clearly visible in the recording. That was an accident, Sarah said, sticking to her story. I was nervous because of all the commotion. I've never seen so many security people in the hospital before. You're a good liar, the second stranger said with a cold smile. But we've been watching you for months, Miss Martinez. We know about your family's financial struggles, your student loans, your mother's medical bills. We also know you're much smarter than you pretend to be. Sarah's stomach dropped. They had been investigating her long before yesterday's incident. I don't know what you want from me. Dr. Richardson stepped closer. What we want is very simple. You're going to help us complete what we started yesterday. Senator Morrison survived the initial attempt, but he's still in intensive care. Access to his room is limited, but nurses come and go freely. You want me to kill a patient? Sarah asked, genuine horror in her voice. We want you to ensure that a traitor to this country doesn't wake up to spread his lies, the first stranger corrected. Senator Morrison was planning to destroy the careers of patriotic Americans who were simply trying to protect national security interests. Sarah realized they actually believed their own twisted justification. In their minds, they weren't traitors. They were patriots saving the country from a corrupt politician. This delusion made them even more dangerous. I can't do something like that, Sarah said, letting fear creep into her voice. I became a nurse to save lives, not take them. You'll do it, Dr. Richardson said quietly, because if you don't, your family will pay the price. Your father works late shifts cleaning office buildings. Very isolated work. Your mother walks to her job at the grocery store every morning at 6:30. Accidents happen to people who don't cooperate. The casual way he threatened her family made Sarah's blood boil, but she forced herself to appear frightened and defeated. What do you want me to do? The second stranger handed her a small vial filled with clear liquid. This will cause cardiac arrest that appears completely natural. No autopsy will detect it. You simply inject it into his foreline during your evening rounds. Sarah took the vial with trembling hands, careful not to let them see the small panic button she was concealing. How do I know you'll leave my family alone if I do this? You don't, Dr. Richardson replied. But you can be certain what will happen to them if you don't. I need time to think, Sarah said desperately. This is a lot to process. You have until 10 o'clock tonight, the first stranger said, checking his watch. That's 3 hours. If Senator Morrison isn't dead by then, your usefulness ends along with your life. The three men left her alone in room 314, but Sarah knew she was being watched. Security cameras that had been mysteriously broken for months were suddenly working again, and she could feel eyes on her as she tried to resume normal nursing duties. She made her way to the bathroom and locked the door, then pressed the panic button 3 times in rapid succession, the emergency signal General Apache had taught her. Within minutes, her phone buzzed with a text message that looked like a normal hospital communication, but contained a hidden code. The message appeared to be about medication inventory, but reading every third word revealed the real message. Stay calm. Help coming. Keep device safe. Trust yourself. Sarah flushed the toilet and washed her hands, buying time to think. She couldn't just wait for rescue. Senator Morrison's life depended on her actions in the next few hours. She also couldn't risk her family's safety by refusing to cooperate. Somehow, she needed to find a third option. Walking past the intensive care unit, she caught a glimpse of Senator Morrison through the window. He was still unconscious, surrounded by monitors and life support equipment. 2 federal agents guarded his room, but Sarah recognized them as the real ones she had met earlier with General Apache. Dr. Mitchell approached her in the hallway, looking concerned. Sarah, are you all right? You look pale. She wanted desperately to confide in him, but couldn't risk exposing him to danger. Just tired, she replied. Long day. I heard there was some excitement in trauma earlier, he said carefully. Something about federal agents and special patients. The way he emphasized certain words made Sarah look at him more closely. There was something in his expression that suggested he knew more than he was saying. Dr. Mitchell, she said quietly, if you needed to get a message to someone important, someone in authority, how would you do it? He studied her face for a long moment. Hypothetically, I might mention it to the janitor who's been working the East Wing tonight. He seems very interested in hospital security and has been asking a lot of questions about unusual activities. Sarah's heart leaped. The janitor was one of General Apache's undercover agents. Thank you, she whispered. That's very helpful advice. As Dr. Mitchell walked away, Sarah realized she wasn't as alone as she had feared. General Apache had positioned his people throughout the hospital, and they were watching out for her even when she couldn't see them. But time was running out. In less than 3 hours, she would have to make a choice that would determine whether she could live with herself. The vial of poison felt like it was burning a hole in her pocket, and she could feel the weight of everyone's expectations pressing down on her shoulders. The daughter of a janitor and cafeteria worker was about to discover just how much courage she really possessed. At 9:45 that evening, Sarah stood outside Senator Morrison's room with a vial of poison in her pocket and a heart full of determination. She had spent the last hour implementing a plan that would require perfect timing and nerves of steel. The 2 federal agents guarding the door nodded as she approached with a medication cart. Evening rounds, she explained quietly, showing them her hospital ID. Inside the room, Senator Morrison was still unconscious but stable. The monitors showed steady vital signs, and his breathing was regular. Sarah looked down at the man whose life hung in the balance and made her final decision. Instead of the poison, she drew a harmless saline solution into a syringe and injected it into the senator's foreline. Then, she took out the real vial and carefully poured its contents into a specimen cup she had prepared, sealing it as evidence for General Apache's team. But her most important task was still ahead. Moving to the far side of the bed where the security cameras couldn't see her clearly, Sarah did something she had never done in 6 years of nursing. She deliberately triggered a medical emergency. Using a technique she had learned in advanced life support training, she applied pressure to a specific point on the senator's neck that would cause his blood pressure to drop dramatically. The monitors immediately began alarming, and within seconds, the room was flooded with medical personnel responding to the code blue. In the chaos that followed, Sarah slipped away from the bed and activated her panic button one final time. She had given General Apache's team the distraction they needed to move into position throughout the hospital. Dr. Richardson burst into the room, followed by the 2 conspirators from earlier. What happened? He demanded, seeing the medical team working frantically around Senator Morrison. Sudden cardiac episode, Sarah replied, her voice shaking with what appeared to be distress. I had just given him his medication when all the alarms went off. The first stranger grabbed her arm roughly. What medication? Just his prescribed dosage, Sarah said, pulling away from him. The same thing he's been getting all day. But the stranger's grip on her arm revealed something that changed everything. Rolling up slightly from his sleeve was the edge of a tattoo, a distinctive design she had seen before in her father's military history books. It was the symbol of a unit that had been disbanded for war crimes 20 years ago. General Apache appeared in the doorway at that moment, flanked by a team of federal agents. Dr. Richardson, you're under arrest for conspiracy, treason, and attempted murder. The room exploded into action as the conspirators realized they had been trapped. The first stranger reached for his weapon, but Sarah was ready. Years of moving heavy patience had given her surprising strength, and she drove her elbow into his solar plexus with enough force to double him over. The second stranger tried to run but found his path blocked by agents disguised as hospital staff. Dr. Richardson stood frozen as handcuffs were placed around his wrists, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. You foolish girl, he snarled at Sarah. You have no idea what you've done. You've destroyed good men who were trying to protect this country. I've stopped murderers who were hiding behind patriotism, Sarah replied firmly. There's a difference. As the arrests were completed and the conspirators were led away, General Apache approached Sarah with an expression of deep respect. The specimen cup you prepared tested positive for a synthetic toxin that would have been undetectable in a normal autopsy, he told her quietly. Your quick thinking not only saved Senator Morrison's life, but provided crucial evidence for prosecuting this conspiracy. What happens now? Sarah asked, suddenly, feeling the exhaustion of the past 24 hours. Now you go back to being a nurse, General Apache replied with a smile. But you'll never be just a nurse again. What you did here required the kind of courage and intelligence that can't be taught. Over the following weeks, the conspiracy unraveled completely. Dr. Richardson and his accomplices had been part of a larger network selling medical information about government officials to foreign intelligence services. Patients with security clearances were being systematically murdered to prevent them from exposing state secrets they had learned in their work. Sarah's actions had not only stopped an assassination, but broken up an entire spy ring that had been operating for years. The media attention was overwhelming at first. Reporters called her a hero, but Sarah always corrected them. "I'm just a nurse who did her job," she would say. "Protecting patients is what we're trained to do." 6 months later, Sarah received an unexpected visitor at the hospital. Senator Morrison, now fully recovered, came to thank her personally for saving his life. "Miss Martinez," he said, shaking her hand warmly, "I understand you've been offered positions with several federal agencies." It was true. General Apache had recommended her for positions with both the CIA and FBI, praising her observational skills and ability to remain calm under pressure. "I'm honored by the offers," Sarah replied. "But I'm staying right here. This is where I belong." Senator Morrison smiled. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say. The country needs people like you in places like this. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things where no one expects them." That evening, as Sarah finished her shift, she reflected on how much had changed and how much had stayed the same. She still worked 12-hour shifts, still dealt with difficult doctors, still went home to her small apartment exhausted. But now she carried herself differently. The daughter of a janitor and cafeteria worker had learned that heroism didn't require a uniform or a title. Sometimes it just required a nurse willing to trust her instincts and do what was right, no matter the cost. Dr. Mitchell approached her as she was leaving. "Sarah, I never got the chance to ask. How did you know? What made you realize something was wrong?" Sarah thought for a moment before answering. "You taught me that patients always tell you what's wrong if you're willing to listen. The same thing applies to situations. Everything around us was saying something was wrong. I just finally started listening." As she walked out into the night air, Sarah smiled to herself. Tomorrow would bring another shift, more patients to care for, and probably someone who would dismiss her as just a nurse. But she knew the truth now. There was no such thing as just a nurse, just a janitor, or just anyone. Every person had the potential for greatness when circumstances demanded it. The real heroes, she had learned, were often hiding in plain sight, wearing scrubs and name badges, quietly making the world a better place one patient at a time.